thanks again for spending some time here with us today. What we're going to be talking about is enterprise security with Symantec. We'll talk a little bit about industry trends, threat landscape changes, and then what Symantec is looking to do in the future to change with those needs. My name is James Lanning. I'm a sales engineer with ITS Partners. And just a little bit about ITS before we go on. We're a national Symantec partner. We're headquartered in Grand Rapids, Michigan. 10 years of experience in infrastructure management and security. We have been Symantec Partner of the Year in 2005, 2007, 2011. And I just want to say that it has been a genuine pleasure working with Symantec so far. And hopefully by the end of the webinar you'll be as charged up as I am about the direction that Symantec is going in the future. Let's talk a little bit about the agenda here today. What we're going to be doing, like I had said before, talking about trends in the industry, changes to the threat landscape, and then how Symantec is responding. So let's get right into it here in our IT trends. We're not going to touch on all of them, but we're going to talk about some of the ones that are really on the minds of IT security these days. And the first one we're going to talk about is consumerization, referring to the fact that these days people want to do the things the way they want to do them. For example, walking into a store, you buy what you want. You don't buy what the store tells you to get. So users want iPhones, they want tablets, they want to work from home, and we as the industry need to respond to this growing plethora of devices and locations from which these devices are being used. It's obviously a trend that can't really be fought. It needs to be embraced. And on the topic of devices and BYOD, in a land called Security-topia, we simply wouldn't have them. There just wouldn't be any. But sadly, we don't live in Security-topia, and we have to deal with the situation. So this mobility thing is changing everything, and it has been for a little while now. The users have become all-powerful, and the users are driving our response to what's going on in our organizations. So you have users that are on a whole different side of the glass, and we have to be on the other side of that glass supporting those users. So the question becomes, what are we doing to enable this workforce and make that workforce more productive, but still not compromise on the security of those devices, but more importantly, the security of the data that those devices are carrying, or the data that's being pushed out to them. Jumping into another key trend in the threat landscape, a little bit of history here. Back in the days of information security innocence, people that were acting maliciously were doing so out of novelty, out of a desire for notoriety, to show what their skills were. There was a fame aspect about it. And the bigger splash you could make, the more of a news story that you could produce about, lots and lots of people clicking on your email link and having their CD tray pop out every 5 minutes. That was what people were after, and they were specifically just targeting the devices themselves and compromising those devices for their purposes. But what we've seen is that the new motivation has become money. These skills have become very much in demand, and it's been discovered that using the right set of tools and the right set of expertise, lots and lots of money can be made. The crypto locker situation that a lot of places and organizations are dealing with now is a great example of a pretty basic concept of malware taking files and encrypting them and storing the keys offshore has led to over $500 million in Bitcoin money being put into the pockets of these folks. So we've gone from having to protect the devices themselves to having to protect people, identities, and information. And that is only becoming more and more prevalent, with newer motivations being political, with state-sponsored malware, extremely skilled, extremely well-funded people attacking infrastructure to gain data that is potentially capable of being used in a warfare setting. And the infrastructures that they're attacking are generally, and I think that we have to admit this, a little bit behind the 8 ball in defending these threats. One of the key understandings that we've come to is that breaches today, with 2013 especially being what we're calling the year of the mega breach, are inevitable. They're going to happen. Targeted attacks are not a fantasy. They're a reality that we are all gaining a large measure of awareness of these days. Getting back to the concept of consumerism, hacking tools have been condensed into hacking suites that are available for download. So the skills and the tools that today's malicious attackers are developed over the years, those have been passed on to the new generation of people that don't even need to put all the effort into making them. Instead, they can have immediate access to them. The really skilled people that made them are now being paid large sums of money to attack data that's valuable to very wealthy people and very wealthy states. So a couple more stats to look at on this slide. The first three are not going to surprise anyone, speaking to essentially the proliferation of breaches and data loss incidents that people are experiencing. 77% of organizations have rogue cloud deployments, meaning you have users that are independently putting your data onto the Dropboxes and OneDrives of the world, and you just simply don't know about it. Or maybe you do, and it's just very difficult from a business process standpoint to stop it. But what we want to focus on this slide is that last stat, average of around 8 months to discover that a breach has happened. And then on top of that, there's an average of 60 days before reporting that breach will occur. And think about how long after that it's going to take to address that vulnerability and to remediate the damage that's been done. Within an 8-month period, if any data has been exfiltrated from that environment, where do we step in, and how long does it take to step in and stop that bleed? So again, the age of innocence is over now. Everyone is aware that these breaches are inevitable. And our goal, what we're going to talk a lot about today, is getting better at detecting and responding to them. So I wanted to talk a little bit about how Symantec has, through its understanding of malicious activity, broken down sort of the steps and stages of a targeted attack. And you have 5 steps: reconnaissance, incursion, discovery, capture, and exfiltration. So this is meant to illustrate, first of all, that attackers have an advantage. They can do all 5 of these theoretically without even being detected. And in fact, the first 3 or 4 they can do with very low risk to themselves at all. And meanwhile, security teams have a multitude of threat vectors to protect against. They have a huge pile, a huge stack of point solutions that they're trying to manage to address these vulnerabilities and reduce the risk. But it's not all bad news. The good news about what we see in the stages of a targeted attack is that the damage really is not done until the final stage, until the exfiltration. So in theory, attempts at recon or incursion up to capture can be detected and responded to before that payload the attackers are after leaves the network. And our goal, which we're going to talk a lot about today, and which you'll hear Symantec talking about in the near future, is being able to increase the agility and speed with which we detect and remediate these ongoing targeted attacks. So more to that point, what I have here broken down is the capabilities of an IT security system or plan that are required at the different stages of targeted attacks. And the key component here is that there's one of these capabilities that is across the board for all of them, and that is the last one that you see there, intelligence. That intelligence is what we're talking about with respect to being able to detect that these attacks are happening. And then, of course, know how to remediate. And on top of that, know that our remediation attempts have been successful. So we might have the processes and products in place, but the question we have to ask ourselves is, are we really gleaning the information from them? Are we analyzing it and then acting on it? And case in point, well, one of the more notorious mega breaches from last year, after all the dust had settled and the forensics was completed, the forensics revealed approximately 60,000 individual log files from various solutions that were very indicative of malicious activity ongoing, and those logs simply were not looked at. And that's just an example of how the point solutions can give us the information we need, but the complexity of managing all of them could cause problems with really being able to understand what's going on. And what we're calling it is sort of trying to find the needle in the needle stack. It's not easy in today's world of stacked up point solutions that are doing their job, but we in turn are having trouble keeping track of everything that they're giving to us in terms of data. The third trend I wanted to talk about today is data growth. And data growth statistics are nearly as impressive, if not as impressive, as the statistics of the amount of breaches and the amount of targeted attacks that are happening year after year. Just an unbelievably large amount of data that organizations are responsible for, and that number is growing about as fast as you can imagine. So when we think about data, we need to start thinking about money. And we need to treat our information as if it really truly is currency. This is the stuff that attackers are trying to get. They don't want to hack your cell phones. They don't want to take down your website or send you spam emails. They want to get your data. And that's why we are focusing on protecting that data instead of getting caught up in protecting the devices. So Semantics Portfolio today addresses all of the requirements we've talked about before, to the extent that there's this huge list of items and solutions that we could go through. Just lots and lots of different solutions that, once again, they are doing their job. The thing is that managing all these technologies is cumbersome, or it can be. And when it comes to gleaning the data out of the logs, we need to find a better way to make that information not just more manageable, but also more relevant to what we're really concerned about in our environment, which is attacks targeting our data, and then of course that data being leaked out through employees that just might not know how to handle it properly. So what we're going to talk about next is what we're doing to address that complexity and how we're going to hopefully be able to make security teams more agile and better informed about what's going on in their environment. So we'll move into our discussions around various business needs. We have 3 business needs that I think that many, if not all, security organizations these days are concerned about. And the first one is enabling a productive workforce. And this speaks to embracing the fact that users want to do what they want to do as far as work is concerned on the device of their choice and from the location of their choice. So security is more than products. It's about reducing risk through solutions to the problems that we're facing, this being one of them, and then effective business processes to ensure those solutions are doing what we want them to do. When we talk about targeted attacks, it's important to understand that the attackers do have an advantage, similar to what I talked about before. They really only have one thing to do. They have one ball that they're trying to juggle, and that is the ball of getting at your data. You, the security organization, you are trying to juggle lots and lots of these balls, and the more balls you try to juggle, the greater the likelihood that one of those balls is going to drop. So we can have a product that effectively addresses a problem, and we have that ball in the air, but the direction we want to move is a situation where the solutions lead to less balls in the air, but those balls are acting more effectively and reducing the chance that there will be balls that get dropped. So to illustrate this from the standpoint of what we're doing these days to protect our information, we're thinking about it today as if it were a 3-legged stool. And without any one of the legs, the stool of information protection will fall over. So the first stool that we want to talk about is the endpoint security stool. So in today's environment in endpoint security, we have multiple different people responsible for managing multiple different products. And this leads to response time bogging down and man hours being consumed with having to send people around to do remediation tasks, and a different set of people involved with monitoring logs that most people might not be in contact with the appropriate other teams that need to have the responsibility. Basically what we need more of is integration. And what we're going to see from Symantec down the road, in fact not very long from now at all, is endpoint management, endpoint protection, the encryption of those endpoints, and the protection of data loss, all on a single platform in what we're calling our endpoint protection management platform. So there's a common, unified, the fabled single pane of glass management platform for our endpoint security approach. And once again, this is speaking directly to the needs that we have today around being able to collect the information that all these activities, these security activities are producing, and effectively manage them and glean out of that information what we really need to know. So I have an example of one way that this is going to manifest itself. sort of what I've been talking about previously. In today's endpoint security environment, we are having to come up with what's going on the endpoints and analyze it ourselves, and then apply that analysis to what might be going wrong in the industry or in general industry knowledge about what's happening. And then we have to go and make sure the package that is going to patch these endpoints is put together properly, get it onto our endpoint management console, schedule the job to get the patch done. And even though endpoint management tools have vastly improved our ability to do patching in our environments, it's still a situation where a lot of hands-on activity needs to happen before it gets done. So what we're going to be seeing in the future is more and more automation of these patching operations, and not just when a patch comes out it'll be automatically applied. With our unified console that we're going to be seeing from Symantec, endpoints can be identified automatically that are running vulnerable software, and those endpoints can be not just patched but also quarantined from the network, taken off or out of the risk factor until the patch is applied. So we're integrating not just the activity of bringing that endpoint into compliance, but also reducing the risk factor in the meantime by integrating the SEP process. So that's an example of integration that we're going to be seeing on the endpoint side of things. And I wanted to quick mention as well a technology or one of the product offerings that are coming out soon from Symantec specifically around endpoint protection, and that is being called Advanced Threat Protection. Now this is an integration point which takes it really to the next level by enabling our gateway solution there at the bottom to interact with Symantec's managed security services. And managed security services will be able to monitor our logs and trigger remediation activity on the endpoint, and that endpoint will then report back on whether or not that remediation was successful. And I was just talking to one of the managed security services product managers yesterday, and in their testing they've gotten the SLA, if you will, for detecting malicious activity and responding to it down to about 15 minutes, where I don't remember the statistic for what it would be in even a well-configured environment today, but it's a matter of close to 10 or 11 hours for a process like that to take place. So just a view to what Symantec is doing to really raise the bar in terms of the detection and response. And we'll talk more about what that partner network security gateway is going to look like down the road here in the presentation. So moving on to our second business need, embracing bring your own device and cloud products while not compromising on the security. This has been another topic that's talked about quite a bit in terms of what we talked about before with rogue cloud deployments especially. Again, we see a situation where you have a large amount of people responsible for a large amount of products, and they're all focusing on their tasks. But if we could find a way to put that data together and start correlating it, we're going to find that our ability to really respond properly and respond quickly will be improved. getting to our second stool or second leg to our information protection stool, the gateway security. We're taking web security, mail security, we're taking endpoint security remediation, and even more, and putting it onto a single, much more intelligent, much more effective device at the gateway. And this device, whether it's a Symantec product or some of our partner products, which are coming out soon, or the integration with them is coming out soon, this gateway is going to allow us to protect users and information, and not only against the traditional malware downloads, etc., but also network threats that are being used, or network techniques that are being used to obfuscate those malicious activities. So the integration of web and email security, identity protection, and information protection all kind of combines into this concept of advanced threat protection that we are moving towards. Getting back to our example of cloud deployment. The issue is not that users have access to these services. The issue is simply that they're putting data on those services that we don't want to be off our network, or that simply are now on a service that we don't trust in terms of, or we don't necessarily have control over the security. So employees will put these files in the cloud. It's all out there. And what we're trying to do to prevent this is stop it at the network egress. So stop it from going on to the Dropbox or Google at all. And then, of course, get business processes in place to guide employees away from those tendencies. But what we can do, or what we're going to be able to do in the near future, is detect that sensitive data through DLP and encrypt it before it goes on to Dropbox, for example. It will sit out in the cloud as an encrypted file with a key that you manage internally. And then the employee is now free to put files wherever they want to put them if they're allowed to do so, because we are now in control of whether or not that information is going to be protected. And all this intelligence, all this processing and decision making is happening at one location in one area of the network, and it's the one place that we'll need to go to see what all is happening. So the third business need we want to talk about today is the simplification of security. And this speaks once again to the integration that we've been talking about. In the data center, we're seeing a large amount of evolution in terms of data centers moving from these sort of stationary behemoths of computing power and data that is like a very much stationary thing that sits in one spot, to self-service, deploy anywhere, web portals that can deploy servers anywhere in the organization. And the message that I've been bringing today, I would hope, is starting to sound very familiar. And there's a reason for that, trying to drive home the point that point products are doing their job, but the future of security is in integration. So again, we're seeing in our data centers multitudes of people responsible for multitudes of products. And the fact is, the reason we're focusing on data centers as our third leg of the information protection stool is that 94% or so of data that gets compromised lives on these servers, which simply leads to the fact that this is where the attackers are focusing. Think about the data center as being the real battleground of the targeted attack fights that we're fighting. And these data centers are moving from a collection of the exact same kind of server that is spec'd out to do various things to very heterogeneous. We have physical devices, we have virtual devices, we have arrays, appliances. There's so many tools that are used to manage them, and there's just so much complexity. We need to take that to the next level of protection. What we're seeing coming up and what's happening now in data centers is what's called a software-defined data center, where the servers themselves, network and storage resources are being defined to quickly bring these IT services to the business. This means that data centers are very soon going to be 100% virtualized. Part of that is going to be in the cloud, highly responsive to change. So in a dynamic data center where a business unit would be able to requisition servers for itself on a web portal at the click of a button based on its needs, this dynamic data center, of course, needs a more dynamic security response. And that's what we're going to be seeing coming down the line. And if you had a chance to go to Vision this year, you may have seen the keynote speech talking about what Symantec has in fact been doing around this. Talking about our data center security, another example, security before was perceived as a tax, meaning we were paying a lot to be able to have security solutions on servers. Server teams were never happy about adding more tools and more endpoint agents, and so the response was sluggish, the compliance was not always the best, and something needs to change. So what we have today, in fact, from Symantec, the beginnings of our response to that being data center security on an integrated platform where we can do agentless endpoint malware scanning against our server VMs, critical system protection for hardening those servers, and more stuff from that platform, which eventually is going to be integrated even more. So giving us the ability to, from one point, one pane of glass, again, manage a host of VMs that come and go, with VMs basically being completely discardable if, in order to get a new one, we only have to press a button. So I wanted to talk also about what our keys to the future are going to be from the standpoint of Symantec. What are some things that truly differentiate Symantec from the crowd and are enabling this transition into global response and detection on a very rapid basis? An interesting statistic about Symantec is that through NetBackup and the other backup offerings, Symantec is responsible for backing up 50% or more of the Fortune 500's data. This has led to a repository of metrics and metadata that is turning into just an incredible goldmine of information about different trends in terms of what organizations are doing in their environments, attacks that are being seen, etc. And all this information can be gleaned and not just known, but also distributed out to all of Symantec's customers. And what we're going to look at next is what's really enabling that. The Global Intelligence Network is something which, if you've talked with any of the folks at Symantec, you've probably heard a lot about. But this is the repository of data about malicious activity across the globe, from the attacks that are happening, the vulnerabilities that have been discovered. And this is all being done in real time, and it is being done, it is being accessed by a lot of the solutions that Symantec offers right now. But in the future, this is going to turn into sort of what the managed security services of Symantec takes that information and puts it into, that we all then have access to. So if there's a breach in an organization, the data that's gleaned from that breach and the forensics, the vulnerabilities that were discovered, becomes part of the Global Intelligence Network, and you then have access to it as well. So what's happening to the whole of organizations is something that you can personally take advantage of in your organization. I wanted to summarize what we've been talking about today in terms of what Symantec's plan is for the future. This is a very basic slide, and I put it together that way on purpose because I wanted to emphasize these points. Number one is that the focus needs to be put on protecting data. Devices themselves are, of course, a big part of that, but it's the data that attackers are after, and that's where the battles are being fought. Number two is focus on improving detection and response. We already know that these breaches are happening, the attacks are ongoing, and what we need to do as organizations is improve our ability to detect and respond. We need to find the wounds that have been made and stop the bleeding before it's just an overwhelming amount of blood loss, which has been seen time and again, especially recently. So number three is focus on integrated solutions that are targeted at reducing management complexity, which in turn enables us to focus our efforts on areas in our networks that are really at risk and that might even be compromised without us knowing it yet. So this is Symantec's plan for the future. This is where Symantec will be taking us down the road, and you'll be hearing a lot more from us at ITS and Symantec about these three things in the near future. And that's really it for me for today. Thanks everybody for giving us the time today. Enjoy the rest of your afternoon. Thanks again everybody. Have a good one.